Okay, we're live.
We're live.
Yes, we are live. And Jeff living with Practically Tactical and Armed Dynamics. And in this video of, I'm going to call it shit that Jeff finds interesting and hopes that you do too. I'm with a friend of mine, Diana Wang of OpenMat Physio.
Mhm.
And I think this is another one of these interviews that I'm doing that's going to be available publicly and in perpetuity until something gets banned online or whatever. Of me interviewing various different people whose products and services I want to expose because I believe that they offer a great value and have definitely a place in our whether well actually we're going to be talking about me being broken. So um, this is Diana Wang. And Diana, why don't you introduce yourself a little bit and talk about your company and a little bit about your background?
Cool. Well, first of all, thanks for having me on the show. I really appreciate it. When you first came to me about, doing an interview and all that, I was like super honored because, the purpose of OpenMat Physio is to do exactly what we did for you, which is help grapplers who've been struggling with injuries and who've been dealing with problems for a long period of time and haven't really been able to really fully address it. And then being able to see you where you are, where you got your black belt recently and stuff, and training and all that, which that's the biggest fulfillment that we have. So appreciate you having me on the show again. But a little bit about my background. So was born and raised in Southern California. Went to college at the University of the Pacific in Stockton. When I was there, I was studying athletic training. So athletic training is a little bit of a subset of like sports medicine. It's like when you watch like big sporting games and stuff where people, the medical staff on the sideline basically. And for a couple years after I graduated from PT school, I was also working for like the medical staff on the sideline for like IBJJF tournaments and stuff. So that's kind of what athletic training is. But I studied that when I was in undergrad. And then after undergrad, I decided I still wanted to focus a little bit more on like the rehab side of sports medicine. So I went to physical therapy school at the University of the Pacific again in Stockton, studied for 2 years, got my doctor of physical therapy in 2017. And then when I graduated, I was working at a regular like physical therapy clinic, and it was really exciting, for the first month or so. And then afterwards, after the first month, I was like, is this it? I was
Mm.
like, is this it? Is this where I just you know, live the rest of my life working in a place like this? Which, hey, it's nothing. It's I'm not trying to say anything bad about people who do that, but for me personally, I think I was just looking for a little bit more stimulus or something that was a little bit more challenging. And so after like working there for about a year and a half, I decided that I was gonna, quit because I just couldn't handle like being given empty promises and then nothing gets fulfilled,
Mm,
and it's like
interesting.
yeah, and then, it's just, like we could talk, like, about, like, the whole physical therapy structure, pay structure, and stuff in the States, but let's just say, long story short, it's a mess. Um, so after I that happened, I came out of, I left that job, and then I started doing my own thing for just a short period of time, and then COVID hit. So
Mm,
that was like a whole, other was it adjustment where like I had a couple months where I had to figure out how to run like a online type of deal, which is very foreign to like a lot of physical therapists, I think, because we're so like used to in person, right? Everything's in person. Your skills are all in person. Like if it's not in person, then it's going to be really hard to help somebody.
right.
But what was one of the biggest blessings, during that time where everything was shut down was we had to, at least for myself and a lot of my colleagues, like we had to force ourselves to learn
Mm,
how to be able to address problems and help people through video.
mm.
And so that's one of the kind of like the biggest avenues of taking OpenMat towards that direction. But anyway, so after that happened, I was working in like another, like, kind of, like, clinic in LA, like, just for a short period of time because I was like, I still want to have a job, but right now it's like really difficult to like get anything off the ground. So I worked there for a little bit, and I realized, you try a few things, like the same thing a couple times, and you're like, okay, never mind. Like, I don't think this is the right thing for me. Ended up just saying, you know what, screw it. I'm just gonna bet on myself and like really put everything into OpenMat Physio,
Hmm.
and that's where it was born. Like, I went full time OpenMat Physio 2021, yeah, October 2021, and yeah, that was like kind of the birth of really putting everything into this company that is specifically geared towards grapplers,
Hmm.
jiu-jitsu, judo wrestlers and stuff who like I said in the beginning, are dealing with chronic pain and just haven't been able to break out of the cycle, get back to training, have had to modify like their lifestyle for it.
Right.
And that's kind of where we are. So we've been a little bit over a year full time, which has been like really amazing.
Hmm. And so this is going to be such a probably more than likely a foreign idea and concept to people as it was for me.
Yeah.
I don't think that COVID really would probably impact this very much. That so Diana's still on the West Coast. I'm still in Philadelphia. I kind of wish I was on the West Coast, although you guys got storms and shit or something like that. But
Oh man. Right now it's like what's it called?
tsunami
S-
monsoon.
yeah, something going on in the air where there's so much water and it's just like, oh, atmospheric river. That's what it's called. So it's like pouring rain. It's crazy.
Whoa,
Yeah.
that sounds like a space odyssey movie.
I know, yeah. I
Um,
was like, "What? Never heard of that."
but so yeah, so I had been so a little bit of background as well about how I discovered Diana is and Open Mat Physio is a friend of mine bought his now brother-in-law a like a one or two time gift of because he's a grappler. He was I think at that point and they're all friends of mine now, but the person that was bought the gift certificate was a purple belt, really good, which also means that you're probably pretty busted up, and I said, oh, that's interesting because my beep boop bop boop boop hurts like everything, everything hurts, but especially my knee and my shoulder were like really bad. My hands were really bad, but I needed to kind of just chill on them for a little while. Um, but I said, okay, well, do you mind if I contact him and get into touch and find out if he's happy with the product and whatnot? And I think at that point he hadn't even like taken advantage of the gift card yet. But
Mhm.
I was so kind of enamored and it piqued my interest such that I was like, I'm going to contact you and see what happens. I mean, the
Mhm.
worst that happens is I don't get any better. I doubt she's going to mess me up more than the 300-pound guy that just crushed me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, and here's the thing. Here's the foreign idea. Now that I'll land this plane, is she's on the West Coast. I'm on the East Coast. How do you do physical therapy without being, occupying the same space and being able to push someone's hip and adjust their knee? And it's a really kind of a brilliant thing. And one of the other things, and I wanted you to talk about how this works rather than me try to extrapolate something from what we've done. Um, the beautiful thing about this is that you do the initial assessment, which is a Zoom or whatever kind of call, FaceTime call, where she goes through a little like an assessment. Actually, no, this is where I was impressed. Um, you like I literally interrupt myself. The late great William April was like, "This is amazing." He interrupts himself. But um, what was I saying? I was saying about the
The assessment, and then you said, "This is
oh
where I."
oh
Yeah.
thank you. You spent when we were just talking in the initial thing, an hour and a half talking to me about in this initial assessment. And you asked me a question that really stood out in my mind. And this was because I don't make any decisions like face to face unless I'm at a gun show and I have to buy the gun or else it'll walk or something like that. Um, you asked me, where do you see yourself in 6 months? And I was like, okay, this is someone, and never forgot that. I was like, this is someone who's really looking at the physical being person at as on a holistic, full body level. Because every time I've ever been to physical therapy, which is many times, and honestly, I've had some very good physical therapists within their own right, and I've had good results, but nobody ever asked me that. And that's the kind of thing that differentiates immediately. And that's the thing that I thought the next day, I'm like, I have to give her my money because, because she gives a shit. Like it was beyond, okay, Mrs. Esterhaus. So we're gonna fix your hip now because you had a replacement.
Mhm.
So can you tell me a little bit about the, doing it online and also that the Train Heroic, if you're still using that
Mhm.
software?
Yeah. Yeah, so you touched on a lot of really, really cool things that kind of like from your experience, right? Of how it was going through the assessment and all. And we'll kind of start with the in the beginning where you were asking about, what the initial assessment and how that's even possible to do any type of virtual work together and all. And again, during COVID, myself and a lot of my colleagues, I'm very, very blessed to have like some of the most incredible mentors who are like some of the smartest people I've ever met, right? And they for some reason feel like I am worth investing in because I'm just very persistent and will not stop showing up at their seminars and all that, and willing to just kind of put myself out there to learn. But one of the things that I think is going to be the changing, like game changer in terms of physical therapy moving forward in general, if we talk about that, is that physical therapy is going to start to look more like a strength program, right? So when we look at the continuum of training and rehab, it's on the same continuum, just on two different sides. So the physical therapists that end up, in the long run, able to assess movement, able to create a smart program in the beginning, able to progress that program into whatever goal the client needs, are the ones that are going to survive. Because a lot of these like manual techniques, like there's nothing wrong with them. But the thing is, we're starting to see so much better results coming from if you have the skill of being able to assess movement, be able to adjust movement, being able to create a program and think about long-term goals rather than saying, oh, 3 times a week for 6 to 8 weeks or whatever, right? Because there's a ton of research that shows like there's a lot of people that have reoccurring problems because they just never resolve it completely. So, one of the biggest things that like we went through when we did our assessment is looking at your movement in general. Like, first of all, looking at how well you move, looking at range of motion, looking at knowing what strength exercises and assessments to look at to say, okay, this is going to give me a good idea about his quad strength, about his hamstring strength, about his calf strength, like, and then understanding that when we're dealing with different body parts, how those body parts move based on where your body's positioned and how those body parts function based on what stress we put on top of it. So, when we have a good understanding of those things and we have a very like specific structured assessment, then it's almost like we can paint this picture of, okay, from head to toe, what does Jeff look like? Okay, his mobility here is a little lacking. What is the reason? And we dig a little bit deeper into that. And there's always like there's so much that you can dig into with somebody's movement. Um, but if we're able to really like hone in on the specific ones, like you could literally do like a whole assessment on shoulder for like an hour.
Hmm.
But what if that's not the most important thing? Like, what if the shoulder isn't exactly the problem? What if it's your upper back? That's something that's limiting your movement. We have to be able to be a little bit more of like a sniper and like pick the things that we need to choose and look at rather than just being like, let's look at everything on the shoulder, right? So for you, I think we really did hone in on specific things like, ooh, okay, I see that's a big problem and that can contribute to this, and this is why we need to work on this, right? Um, so that kind of goes like a little bit of a picture of like how we're able to do online assessments is like you have to really have an develop a little bit of like a coach's eye or like a physical therapy eye. Like you have to be able to see, okay, this is not the shape, the body shape that we're looking for. What why is the reason why they can't get into it? And then be able to adjust that. And if you can adjust that, then we can start to really be able to start creating a program that makes sense for you.
Mm.
Um, the other thing that I think is really important to note that you mentioned is like the 6 month, like where do you see yourself in 6 months? Because when I was working at my first my first job, there was a lot of like, oh, in 6 to 8 weeks, like you're gonna be completely healed, right? But if we think about just in general, like when you go and lift weights, it takes minimum 6 to 8 weeks for you to even develop, like to even start developing muscle. So it's almost like unrealistic to promise somebody that, hey, in 6 to 8 weeks, you're gonna be like from 0 to 100, right? And so nowadays, it's when we look at just the big picture, especially if you're a lot of grapplers, their goal, you can assume is to get back to training, is that you want to be able to get from where you are, get back to training 100%. It's gonna take time. And the reality is every time we work with any client, we have to tell them like, I'm not going to sugarcoat things and say, oh, cool, we're going to get things done in 2 months and you're going to be all good and you never have to deal with this problem ever again. It's, hey, in the first couple months, it's going to be a little tough, right? We're going to be pushing past your history of injuries. We're going to be pushing past your fear of injury. Like these are all things that take time to really work. And then a little bit later, then we're starting to see some of the gains. And now we're starting to see some of the strength and confidence, and all those things take time. So when we ask the question of where do you see yourself in 6 months, it's truly that from now until 6 months, we want to see you be able to hit your goals. And like you said, right, you're like, and the reality is I really do give a shit. Like I really do. Like every single person that like has come to OpenMat Physio and work with us, like we put in like 100% effort to, however many video sessions we need, however many text messages we need to exchange to
Mm.
get you to where you need to be. Like that's the reason why we do what we do. You know what I mean? So I don't know if that answers all of your questions.
It answers quite a few, and I will also say that one of the things, hell, I am actually not great at that you're really good at is you're extremely responsive in the
Mhm.
most prompt of fashions that I mean of anyone that I've ever come across in
Yeah.
any industry. Like if I texted her, if I had a question or a comment on Train Heroic. Train Heroic, you are still using Train Heroic.
Yes, yes, yes. So that's just a personal training app that we use to program our clients, like rehab or strength programs, and yeah.
And what it is, it's an app you download, and then Diana will give like I guess a week at a time of programming, and then you're thinking like, well, how does that work? And what it is it's actually a really clever app. Is you go on, so I log in and I have my exercises, and I don't know or remember how to do them as said or whatnot. And like half this shit's got like funky names, and you're like, what is a bear crawl or whatever, you know? And there's little videos, typically 30 seconds or under, 30 seconds to a minute, kind of almost longest of. So it's like, okay, how do I do this exercise? You click on the video, and it's got typically like a really hot athlete person. I could say that because it's my show. Actually, it's Nick's show, so I should make it inappropriate. But and they're doing some sort of, they're demonstrating the exercise or whatnot, the physical therapy rehabilitation thing that I'm trying to do, and it works really well. And then you log your reps, you log your weight if there's weight involved. And then there's like a room for comments if there are comments. Like you don't have to write a comment, but for example, like one of the things that we talked about was, just generally speaking, let me know. You would say like, let me know if this is too easy. Let me know if this is really hard. And there's different gauges and things like that. But suffice to say, it's actually very simple. It's once you kind of use it I think that I was frustrated after like the first thing because of course I've got no patience. But you're like, give it a week so that you understand kind of like what the formatting actually means. And it was really, really useful. It was and then once I got the hang of it, which only took a couple sessions, I really, really liked it. And that's how to come full circle, Diana has the ability to be on the, I don't know how many miles the 3,000 or
Oh,
whatever.
really far. I don't know.
Really further than I could ever walk or bike or whatever. And still have the ability to give input on a client's progress or setbacks, or is this working? Is this not working? So also let me say that when I went to Diana's, kind of like what was my experience with it? Like, why was I there? It was my shoulder, it was my knee. We did, I think, 8 weeks of rehab, and then like it was really cool. Oh, you know what? I'll say right now also is right now I kind of have a little tear in my shoulder. It's a slap tear, whatever that is. I looked it up and I was like, that's a bunch of words I can't remember. But suffice to say, it's a little tear in my shoulder. I've been off of lifting and jujitsu for about 6 weeks,
Mm,
and also I'm just like my knee is like super unhappy, but it's starting to creep back in. So
mm.
we are going to be doing. And by the way, I'm told Diana, I gave her no option. I was like, I'm paying because I want no one to be able to say, "Oh, well, of course he's going to say it was good. Like he got it for free." I was like, I'm gonna, and she's extreme. I will not quote prices because I'm not going to do that because everything's always subject to change. But we're going to be doing 8 weeks for me to rehab, especially my shoulder and probably half of the rest of my body. And then we're going to do another show, a second show of essentially the after. So this is the before and the introduction, and then it'll be the after and kind of what things she saw and what things I experienced while I'm getting back in, because I start jujitsu flow rolling tomorrow night and lifting as well next week, lighter weight. So that's kind of what the why this show is also happening, is we thought it would be a cool idea to do a before and after. Now, question for you,
Mhm.
as well as if you have any comments about that, is you when you were telling me about some of your background. So you mentioned on this show the IBJJF
Mhm.
and being like kind of like one of I was going to say, yeah, one of those hot physical trainer people that runs into the middle and be like, everybody stop, I have his knee or whatever. I feel like college football always has like the friggin' hottest people. I'm just like, I just want to go there and get injured.
Oh my god.
Whatever. Okay. But you were mentioning in the first time that we talked, when I was having like utilizing your services, like what is different is that how you're kind of looking at things is specifically through the eyes. And now that you're practicing jujitsu, that you were talking about kind of things being strung together a little bit differently than the typical athlete, muscle wise
Mhm.
on our bodies. The way that we use our bodies is a little bit different than a
Mhm.
typical runner, etc. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, jujitsu in general is a very uniquely demanding activity, right? If we think about it, um, there's a like with any type of sport, there's different demands. So running has a different demand, than basketball has a different demand than jujitsu. And jujitsu itself, we have to understand like what it takes for what does an athlete have to have in order to be successful at jujitsu, as in being able to train, being able to stay healthy, right? Those are kind of like the main things that we're looking at, and then obviously being able to progress and work towards their goals. But some of the unique things about jujitsu is flexibility is something that is very useful, because you have to be put in all these funky positions. If you're able to be flexible and kind of roll around and able to get your knee or your hip in different positions, then a lot of times it's like the game of inches. Like if you can do that, then the chance of you retaining guard or something, stopping the pass, might be, like in your favor. And then there's the other side of it, which is, yeah, being flexible is great, but are you strong in that range of motion? So being able to get into an end range, but then also having the ability to push somebody away or pull somebody towards you, or even just hold the position, like that's really unique. Like there aren't a ton of other sports out there that have that specific feature or that specific demand that we have to have as jujitsu athletes, right? And then there's like the whole aspect of training load. So um for certain athletes, you have off season, on season and stuff, and preseason and all that, like traditional sports. But in jiu-jitsu, we don't have that. Like that doesn't exist. You train year round. You maybe have a fight camp, And then you have like a pre-fight camp, and then you do a fight camp, you come back and you're like, oh, I'm just gonna go back and train again, you know? So there's not much of like any understanding of when I should rest. It's always like just train, and then if my body breaks down, then maybe take a break. So that
Very interesting.
yeah, it's really
That's
really
I
interesting
never
because
thought of it that way. Like like as far as seasons and off season.
yeah,
Oh,
and like the thing about the problem with that is like our bodies can only handle a certain amount of stress before it starts to backfire, right? So most people say like I trained super hard for months and then like one day I just like everything broke. Which makes sense. Like when we think about like just in general, not even jujitsu, if we think about like powerlifting, right? They go in cycles where it's like I'm gonna lift really, really heavy for a little while. I'm gonna slowly move up, and I'm gonna have a deload week. A deload week is they're gonna drop the weight down, but they're still gonna be maintaining their lifts. Like if we can take that concept and understand, okay, there needs to be a certain level of rest, there needs to be a certain level of compromise when it comes to training really hard and then training not super hard. Then if we can understand that concept, I think a lot of jiu-jitsu athletes would be able to minimize the amount of injuries that they deal with because they're not constantly like pushing their body to 100%.
hmm.
Um, and that's something like when you're mentioning with like the IBJJF, like the nice thing about now that training jiu-jitsu for a couple years, I've been able to be familiar with positions and like setups and like what it looks like if somebody was going to go for a submission or somebody's hunting for certain things. It's helpful knowing these positions and some of these things that way when let's say someone gets into like about to take someone's back and about to choke them out, then it's like as a medical provider, you're like, okay, I got to watch out for that because what if he doesn't tap? Then he's
Hmm.
going to go unconscious. We got to run out there and be, you know, or like let's say a knee is in a funky position for like a heel hook or something and they keep rolling and rolling, but then they're not tapping, you know, you have to be very conscious about that. So being like a athletic trainer, physical therapist that understands jiu-jitsu, I think it's really unique in that you just get how the entire process works of when you start a match to when you end a match, and then throughout it you can be um aware of like some of these moments where you're like, ooh, I have to be careful, like if that happens then I have to run out there and like help somebody.
Hmm. Yeah,
Yeah,
potential landmines, right?
yeah, I mean I've seen some crazy stuff. Like I remember like at worlds, master worlds a couple years ago, this guy from France like popped out his shoulder because he got caught in a kimura, but I think he didn't know why, but he rolled the opposite direction and basically put himself in
Ooh.
a deeper kimura, and his shoulder just like popped out of the socket. And
Ugh.
I just remember like I was like sitting right Matt's side and he's screaming in French, and I just didn't. I was like, okay, I don't understand what you're saying, but I ran over there and I told him, I was like, just take your like your lapel and just like literally bite on it, and I just like relocated his shoulder because
Ooh.
a lot of times like nowadays it's better to try to relocate joints as soon as possible to
Hmm.
like preserve a lot of the other structures in there. So like the blood vessels, the nerves, even the
Oh.
muscles and the tendons and stuff. If you leave it out for too long, the muscles are going to spasm up, and then you go to the ER and they're like trying to relocate it. It's going to be way
Oh.
harder. And if you can do it right on the spot, you're preserving some of that. You're taking them a lot like out of pain a lot faster,
Hmm.
and then you kind of go on the process of rehabbing. But anyways, that was one of the craziest but kind of coolest stories I've had from working mat side.
That's really interesting. I didn't know that about like trying to relocate the thing as early as
Mhm,
possible, but that makes sense,
mhm.
right?
Yep.
Um, so question also, so you've trained and as a physical therapist, you got your doctorate, you started doing IBJJF, as an athletic trainer and whatnot. At what point in that process or on that timeline did you start looking at jujitsu and being like, this is like, there's something different about what these, was it instantaneous, like, holy shit, what is he doing? Or was it like, there's a different way that we need to be approaching these athletes? Like,
Yeah.
is that a fair question?
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I think right when I started training jujitsu, I was like, wow, this is actually really unique. Like this is something I've never done before. I was exposed to jujitsu like early 2018 because one of my like really good friends was training jujitsu and was trying to convince me to do it. And I'm like, no, I don't want to do this. But eventually got into it because I was at the point in my like fitness, I guess, whatever phase where I wanted something a little bit more challenging. But definitely like the first couple times I started training jiu-jitsu, I was like, wow, this is like really different, right? This is really cool. And I didn't really even think about the rehab side. But as I started training a little bit more, a couple months into it, I started noticing like all of my training partners were injured, right?
Right.
And then I'm like, "Oh, okay, yeah, like, what are you guys doing for it?" And, like, most of them are like, "Oh, I went to my PT, they didn't really understand jujitsu, so they gave me a couple exercises and told me to foam roll and stretch and all that." And I was just like, there has to be a better way, because
Mm,
I've been seeing like the same people constantly getting injured, constantly telling our professor, hey, I'm gonna have to sit out this round. Hey, I'm gonna sit out this round. Oh, I haven't been training for 2 weeks because of this. And it's the same thing. My back, my back, my back, my knee, my knee, my knee. Um, so I kind of got my wheels spinning and I was like, there has to be a better way. Like there's no way that this is like the standard of care for jujitsu. And I
mm,
just like really realized like, wow, like first of all, jujitsu is super niche. Like there's not a lot of people that understand it in general within the population. And then if you take that percentage into healthcare, like that's even smaller.
yeah.
So there's way less people that understand jujitsu unless you train it. And even like care about jujitsu. A lot of some of my friends who are PTs are like literally will send me questions like, I don't know what this word means. Like, can you explain it to me? I have this jujitsu person. But then I like the more I dug into it, like, going online and looking and seeing if there are providers that specifically work with jiu-jitsu athletes, like this, like it doesn't really exist. Like,
Mm.
if anything, there's maybe like 3 people in the entire US that's like, okay, like there's hundreds, if not thousands of jiu-jitsu athletes that need help.
Oh
And
yeah. Probably every one of them.
yeah, everyone, it's a lot. But then I was like, you know what? What if I just like filled that need, and just started to create a little bit more specific of assessments, of programs, of return to mat like training, return to mat performance, like that kind of stuff started getting into my head. And then that's kind of like the birth of OpenMat Physio.
And it's interesting, so I got this, I believe the beginning of the tear. It's not a full tear by any means, but it's enough that I haven't been doing stuff that I like to do. And I did it while I was being stupid. Imagine that. I mean, it was just a stupid thing to do of military press,
Mm,
way too much weight.
mm.
And actually one of the coaches came over and he's like, it's a lot of weight. And I was like, yeah. He's like, what did you do? I was doing like 135-pound overhead press standing. And he's like,
Mm,
it's a lot of weight. And like, what was the last weight that you did? I'm like,
yeah.
uh, it was 100. It was like, I think 120 or
Mhm,
115 or something,
mhm.
something like that. And he's like, so you, so you did a 20-pound jump. And I was like, yeah, because I'm like, as smart as I look, I'm kind of a little bit of a bro science guy sometimes. We've all got that inner stupid dude who's like, yeah, man, I'll just fucking lift more. And so he's like, and this guy's all jacked, and he's a former
Mhm.
Marine and everything, and he's a really good guy, very good trainer. He's like, so Jeff, what would I have to tell you for you to lower that weight? And I'm like, I don't know. He's like, Jeff, do you know how much I go up when I go up in weight for overhead press, military press? And I was like, well, like 5 pounds. He's like, yeah, like 2.5 to 5 pounds.
Yeah, that's
Can we,
reasonable.
can we remove that weight? I was like, okay. And I didn't feel anything, but I think that was the beginning. And then I had my jiu-jitsu coach, Brett Linebarger, who I did the last interview that I did with on BJJ Path to Black Belt here on Practically Tactical. He told me one of the things that he wanted me to do in order to get my black belt. And it's, everything is very unique to the individual practitioner, I think, in jiu-jitsu, more so than any of the martial art that I've done. He's like, you need to now go get really comfortable rolling with, sounds funny, but like strangers, people, because he noticed
Mm,
that when I was rolling with people I didn't know, I would not so much take it easy on them, but I would try to be like nice in maybe, and for me, I believe it was and some sort of attempt to kind of keep it more gentlemanly or nice. And he's like, no, you got to go in there and fucking fight. And like, and until, and especially with people that you don't know, because they're unknown quantities, regardless of
Mhm.
belt, and you need to try to really smash them. This is actually advice he gave me a long time ago. Smash them first, and then you can always be kind later. But I just wasn't translating 100% because I'm
Mhm.
stubborn and slightly stupid, and so uh, lo and behold, so I find myself after this military press thing, and I went to go to Mainline United. My friend Turner and Rachel, they train there. They're very dear friends of mine. They're both purple belts, and she just got a purple belt. And their open mat on Sunday, I mean, they've got like, it's kind of like Daniels in that they've got like 5, 6 black belts of varying
Mhm.
degrees.
Yeah.
And it's a tough open mat. It really is. And Daniels was tough, and this place is, I think, equally tough in the open mat. And there's this brown belt there. I forget his name. I've met him like twice, but I've only rolled with him once. And I watched him, and I was like, because I was a 4-stripe brown at the time, he was just a brown, and I was like, this, he's doing all the things I don't do with this other guy while I was watching. Like he's going inverted. I mean, you could tell
Mhm.
that his library of moves was way more than mine. I mean, by the way, all these books are my boyfriend's. I just, how they always have on CNN the guy that's sitting in front of all those books. I'm like, well, shit, that makes him look smart. That doesn't.
Yeah.
Um, and but meanwhile, my technique held up really, really well. I mean, he's a physical specimen. He's very technical. He's explosive. He's got speed. He's got, endless tank of gas. And really, I mean that. Like, he's the guy that just can roll from the beginning until the end
Mhm.
of open mat. I'm not one of those guys, but so we have a really good roll. Neither of us submit each other. I may have won on points. I don't know. Honestly, I don't even know the point structure.
Mhm.
But it was like a role for my life.
Yeah.
And we were both kind of on our backs, staring up at the ceiling afterwards. Um, and that's when I think, to make a long story longer, that's when I think that it really exacerbated that because my like because it was gi jiu-jitsu, which is
Mhm.
typically what I do. Although I found a rekindled a love for no gi just because it is kind of fun. But from gripping the lapel when I'm in his guard and to try to break the guard, my hand through my wrist, through my elbow, all the way through like the whole. If you just chop this off, I'd be like, I feel fine now. It hurt for, I mean, forget the shoulder part that continued to hurt, throbbing, but like the
Mhm.
whole right side uh was just like shot. Like I was
Yeah.
like, man, if I have to shoot somebody who's trying to kill me, I'm gonna have to use my support hand. These are the things that gun people think about.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But lo and behold, and I got to tell you, like this shoulder, it's so much better now, but it's still not 100% to give
Mhm.
people kind of a gauge.
Yeah.
Now it's just it's positional kind of stuff. But when it first happened, and even for like I'd say for a period of about 3 weeks, it was literally waking me up in the middle of the night, throbbing with pain.
Yeah.
And nothing. I mean, I don't have narcs here, but I wouldn't take them anyway. They make me itchy.
Mhm.
But I, so typically I could take one Aleve and be fine with whatever's going on. I was taking Aleve, I was taking ibuprofen, I tried Tylenol, I tried all these different things, and nothing lessened
Mhm.
the pain. And I was like, there's really something that's wrong.
Mhm.
Um, so help me.
Yeah, I mean, like, that sounds like a recipe for what you're dealing with now,
Yeah.
so it makes sense. I mean, when our bodies exceed the capacity of what we're able to handle, that's typically where we start to have problems. Like it, whether that's weights, whether that's an isometric hold, like what you were doing, and like jujitsu is so dynamic, it's really difficult to be like, oh, this is exactly what caused your problem or whatever. So the best way to kind of look at it is just that you did more than your body could handle. And now the shoulder is being a little achy. Like your body was like, hey, like basically that alarm system. Hey, like what did you do to me? Like, okay, I'm gonna give you some pain. I'm gonna give you some tightness and discomfort until you actually address me. And so that's kind of what you're dealing with. But I mean, um, just to give, I guess, your audience like a little bit of a little look into what we could potentially be looking at when we do our assessment is, because it is a slap tear. A slap tear is just a labral tear that is in a specific direction. That's why they call it a slap tear. But when we think about like those types of problems, I'm more curious as to see how your upper body functions. So how the efficiency of your shoulder works with your rib cage, works with your upper back, and some of the things we'll be looking at are breathing. How are your breathing mechanics? How do you lift your arm overhead? How do you lift your arm to the side? And your range of motion in terms of like external internal rotation. These are all things that we talked about a little bit before that are going to be data points, are going to be information for us to gather and kind of put on a page and say, okay, this is what he's struggling with. I can connect the dots with a couple of these things. This is going to lead to this, and having these pattern recognitions of this is why this could potentially happen. This is why this could potentially happen. Okay, let's go to the root cause of that. So if it's something that has to do with breathing, like a low hanging fruit, yes, let's address that. If it's something to do with a position of your shoulder blade, we need to get your shoulder blade moving a little bit more, then yes, let's do that. But these are some of the things that we'll be looking at. And then of course we'll have our strength standards. So looking at how well can you hold your body weight in like a single arm plank or like a side plank or something. Like these things in the very beginning are going to give us the most baseline read of how your shoulder's functioning. So if you're not able to hold a side plank for a certain amount of time, then it doesn't really give me much confidence that you're going to be in guard and then propping your arm up to try to retain guard, pushing someone away, like and pulling someone towards you. Like these are all very dynamic movements that require strength, speed, and endurance. And if you can't even hold a side plank, then that does not give me any confidence that those things will be comfortable. So it's like, if we can find the lowest level of certain exercises that are going to help us get to like where you need to be, then it's going to give us a better path that we can start to follow, rather than just guessing of like, what do you need to work on? Well, I'm not really sure. Let's just like give you some banded exercises and hope that it helps. Like
Mm.
that's not the point. And then there was something else I want to touch on. You mentioned like way earlier in the show about like, is this too easy? Is it too hard? Like rehab should be something that's challenging. It shouldn't be something that's like, oh, I do it every single day. I don't break a sweat and it's not really like that difficult. It should be something where it feels like a workout, because the only way our body's going to change is if we put enough stress on it. And the only way it's going to adapt is if we continue to progress over time. And it's going to get a little harder, a little harder, a little harder. And the body's going to slowly start to progress and adapt as it gets more challenging.
Hmm. Well, let me ask you this question. So do you think, because I'm going to go to jiu-jitsu tomorrow night, would you advise against like flow rolling with people I trust and just do the technique until we kind of look at stuff?
So the thing is, like, there's always that gray area, right? It's like, as somebody who like, if I just were thinking about it from a PT standpoint, yes, okay, yeah, you should. But at the same time, because you are a black belt, I trust that you understand your body. And I trust that you know that what you can do and can't do when you're rolling, right? So
Right.
usually when it comes to approaching like a client, I always try to meet them halfway. Like if jujitsu is something you want to continue to do, then of course we're going to continue to do jujitsu. But we just have to make modifications. And you know your body better than I do, because I don't know what it feels like, right? So when you go and flow roll with people that you trust, then that means you trust that they're not going to attack your arm, they're not going to
Right.
put you in bad positions where
Or
your
just go
shoulders
real
get hurt.
hard, you
Yeah,
know?
you're not going to roll hard. You're just going positional, moving around, trying to get the blood
Right.
flowing, which I think is actually really great, because the only way you get better at jujitsu is if you train jujitsu. And so it doesn't make any sense to pull someone off the mats if like for like specific sake, unless it's like very specific position situations where like they're going way too hard and they're not listening and they're not like modifying their intensity, then and it's stunting their their rehab progress, then that's the only time I'll say I'm going to pull you off completely.
Mm.
But because you are a black belt, like I'm like, this is my honest advice. I would just say, sure, go flow roll. If you feel comfortable, and assess yourself between rounds. If you feel okay, then keep going, because you're not going to hurt yourself more flow rolling in the next couple days than like, than you have before, right? It's like
Right.
you've already done it. You're not going to go and like decide you're going to go 100% and hurt yourself more. Like, I think you're going to be aware of your body. And then the next time we have this conversation with the assessment, it's not like it's going to be, I trust that it's not going to be worse.
Yeah, I would agree. And, I guess I can, in some very strange world, kind of pull rank and just say that in my eyes, what I can say is that I've been doing it for a long time. How good I
Hmm.
am, I don't know. Right. But what I will say is that I think that this is a cool conversation for people to see. It's honestly, it's good for me to hear again too, is because I do believe that when we have sustained an injury, that we should, regardless of belt, because a lot, sometimes, as my friend Sean Lupka would say, they are just a what the hell does he say? They are a social whatever, like that, you know, I cannot I can't believe I can't remember what Sean says all the time about belts. But anyway, is that I believe that we should have this level of scrutiny when we have suffered or sustained an injury, um, that because constantly, and this is something that the older you get, the less the less fat quickly your muscles are healing, the less quickly, the longer it takes for you to kind of get back to 100%. Just even from, like, I don't know, you could probably talk to the physiology of this, but less testosterone in our
Hmm.
body, recovery is slower. You get injured maybe more easily. You're old, and I'm not like 100 years old, um, but yeah, I think that it's important to look at stuff like this and say, if I am injured, how smart is it for me to go into a class with the and participate, maybe like where I know that the intensity level, maybe I don't bring that intensity level, but it's like you said, rolling with people that you trust, etc. Is this like an unknown quantity? Is this a white belt that just came in and he's going to
Hmm.
pass out, and your knee's going to be on the other side of where it should be? Um,
Hmm.
you know,
Yeah, that's a big, um, one of the biggest pieces of advice in terms of coming back from any injury when you're getting back to training and you're rehabbing and being very intentional about your rehab is choose your training partners like very intelligently, because you never know,
yeah,
like if you never roll with this person, you don't know what they're gonna do, like, and if you it's almost like it's really, like, in your control. You can say yes or no, but that's one of the biggest things I tell, like, clients is, like, when they start to get back to training, especially if they're, like, a lower belt, I'd be like, "Okay, try to be." It's a little bit harder to gauge as a lower belt, but when you're a higher belt, you have the people that you train with. You know the guys and the girls that you can trust and stuff. And it's going to be a little bit easier to say, okay, I want you to go to, let's say we get to a certain point. I'm like, okay, Jeff, I want you to go and you're going to do technique. You're going to do a couple flow rounds. And then I want you to do 2 rounds with 2 people that you trust. So you're going to go 50%. And you're just going to sustain that for 5, 6 minutes. And then you're going to come back and tell me how it feels. Like, I
mm,
think that's going to be a lot easier to do with a higher belt than it is to do with a lower belt, just
absolutely,
purely off experience.
yeah,
But like I've always been a believer that like if we don't have to stop training jujitsu, then we're not going to stop training jujitsu. I don't think it's reasonable to be like, because there's like this whole mental side of jujitsu that a lot of people don't ever touch on or understand, is like most people use it as their social, their community type of that feeds into that part for them, and then also it's like their physical activity. If you take that away, it directly affects mental health. We don't want to do that. We want to make sure that we're able to keep everything as put together as possible, and then start to just add very smart things into your life that is going to help you get to your goal, rather than taking away too much where you're like, oh my god, like I don't have jujitsu, like what am I going to do? We
right,
have to be mindful about that. And I think some providers have the best intentions of saying maybe you should choose a different hobby or maybe you should quit or whatever, but that really disregards like the benefits of jujitsu and the how much it really impacts people's lifestyles rather than just a sport. Like it doesn't. It's literally a lifestyle.
yeah. And I recall now what Sean Lucas says: belts are a social construct. Which I'm
Yeah,
like, well, he's got a really good point there, but
it's
at the
true,
same
it's true.
time, I think maybe what it should indicate is that you're just a little bit smarter about how you train, if nothing else. You know
Yeah,
what I mean?
which makes sense, which makes sense.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I know that you have a meeting to go to shortly.
Yes.
I'm going to give you last word, and then we will look at coming back in 7, 8 weeks and doing a second after show.
Cool.
Um,
Yeah.
any last thoughts about kind of anything?
Um, well, there's so much that you can touch on with PT or rehab for the grappling athlete, but I think it's going to be something that we can talk about more in the second show.
Yeah.
But if you want to just find us on social media, you can always find us on our website www.openmatphysio.com, and then on Instagram is openmat_physio. We try to put up a lot of content that is like very reasonable, very understanding of like the person and then how injuries can affect grappling athletes. And then you can always us if you have any questions, and we're more than happy to help guide you if you're dealing with the problem.
Yeah, and awesome. So, and by the way, Diana, in the description box below this video, once it's on, all your information will be there. Not your cell phone,
Cool.
but the publicly available info. And I want to kind of wrap it on this because this is like uh, the whole thing in a nutshell. Nick's hair is better. Aaron, that's not even funny, bro. That's not what I wanted to say. It literally came on. It was as I was about to read another. So there is a chat, but because
Oh, yeah, I just saw it right now.
yeah, don't worry because we hadn't like promoted the show super hard because we're trying to figure out a time.
Yeah,
Whatever,
totally.
it'll be out there and we'll give links to people. But Marvin kind of summed it up. Aaron tricked me. Marvin says the last 5 minutes of the conversation has been really informative. Anyone with an injury hates being off the mat and hates being told no training.
Mhm.
Doesn't
Yeah,
that just sum up the whole thing? Thank you,
yeah,
Marvin.
that's literally like, what the majority of jujitsu athletes face when they go into any type of like medical professional is,
Yeah,
hey, I think you should choose something different. Where it's like, no, I'm not gonna do that. So that's why we approach it from a different viewpoint of like, okay, what are you doing right now? Can we scale back just a little bit in the meantime? And then kind of like that's and then transparency and communication is so important that we try to be as communicative with our clients and understand, okay, where you are mentally, we get to know you as a person, where you are physically, and then we challenge you and push you. And that's like the goal of how we're going to be able to get back to
yeah,
training. It's not literally taking a break. Like, how are you going to get from 0 to 100 without trying 0 to 30 to 40 50 60 70 80 100?
yeah. Definitely increments.
Increments, always
Yeah.
increments.
And then Marvin Smith says one more thing, which we'll I guess we'll try to wrap on is love the idea of crafting a path forward through good physio. On that note, I want to say that I can, having already used Diana's product, being OpenMat Physio, to such great effect. I mean, it not only healed up what needed to, but it made me so strong, so strong. Like it was like night and day. I went from kind of hobbling around like, hey, I've got a gammy leg, like Dr. Strangelove, to feeling really good, really solid, and having all those support muscles also being taken into account. So, Diana, thank you so much for coming. I'm really looking forward to having you on again because that also means that I'm better.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I'm super excited. It's gonna be really fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you again, and thank you everybody for joining us. And you can find more information in the description box below. You can like and subscribe to Practically Tactical, like and subscribe to Open Math Physio, and we will see you in the next super cool Jeff interview because I
Yep.
hate Jesse and I hate Nick. Bye.
Bye.
End broadcast.